From race relations here in the country to the death of George Floyd, I sit down one-on-one with community activist Pastor Thomas Dixon for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Pastor Thomas Dixon,
Quintin,
welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It's good to see you again.
Likewise.
Yes, sir.
I watched your interview with Layla Gulen, obviously with Fox 24 News now, and she asked you to describe what's going on right now in the country as far as civil unrest, and you basically say covert racism. What exactly is that right now?
Okay, when we look at the catalyst for all of the uprising that we see right now, it's over an issue that has been brought to the forefront for a long time. The issue of officer-involved shootings that result in the deaths of black people, black and brown people. A disparate amount of killings that black people, after meeting up with law enforcement, just wind up dead. It's crazy because it's like we represent 13% of the population, and the number of killings, officer-involved killings, we're 25%. It doesn't make sense. So if it was equal, if it was 50% each, okay, white people, black people, then we'd be great. But it's not. There's this disparity in the amount of deaths. That racism, it's blatant when we look at the numbers, when we look at the percentages, when we look at the fact that 99% of the officers who are involved in these shootings never go to court. Never go to court, but they do in white cases. Looking at the systemic nature of racism, also all of the contributing factors why a person might be even stopped by the police because of varying reasons, all of those things are the things that need to be dismantled in order to make sure that we dig up the root of aggressive policing with black and brown people, the roots of the educational system, the roots of the economic system. All of these things are disparate treatments of minorities that are ultimately weakening us to the impact of life, just enjoying life,
And what other factors should be dismantled right now when it comes to racism?
I'm having a hard time with this mask. It's all of the factors that give us the ability to enjoy life.
Okay.
The way that our minority communities are most likely to have a disparity in education. The way that the system is set up, especially now as they're moving more toward privatization and less toward public education, how the most impacted of those will be black and brown children, poor children, so that we don't get a good education. Ultimately, as people point fingers to the urban communities, those who get involved with criminal activity. Well, we know that lack of education is a major contributor to incarceration. So those same black and brown children are more likely to become incarcerated. Also, without that lack of education, starting with the fact that there's the disparate educational system, the lack of ability to actually get a decent job that pays a decent wage. And those same people who have an opportunity to do better by everyone refuse to raise the minimum wages so that those same black and brown people will have a chance at life in America. Healthcare. We don't have access to quality healthcare. Many of us who have jobs, even the benefits have been taken away. So we don't have access to that healthcare. All of these things ultimately, and of course over-aggressive policing, and there's so many others. We have food deserts in our communities, in our urban communities. We have our communities that are built on soil that's contaminated a lot of times. And we don't know it because when we move in there and we're just there. So all of these things are fundamentally what I would call, be classified under systemic racism, because other ethnicities, especially white America, doesn't necessarily go through what we as black Americans do. But still in all, we have a pledge at the end of it that promises liberty and justice for all. Well, there are two different types of justices. There's a justice for white America, and there's a justice for black and brown America. White people don't have to teach their children when it comes to law enforcement. They don't have to have the talk. What do you do when you encounter police? How do you encounter the police and come out alive? White people don't have to do that. Why in America should anybody have to tell their children, or there be a separate standard for any ethnicity than another ethnicity, if it was equal? So it's that covert racism, it's that undercover racism, it's the roots of racism that now the fruit is on the trees, and now it's resulting in chaos in our nation.
You talked earlier about soil and being contaminated. Where exactly is the soil contaminated when it comes to education?
It's that, back to that same thing. We can look Charleston County in particular, okay? In Charleston County, we have 9 of the worst schools in South Carolina. 8 of them are located in North Charleston, and of those 8, all 8 of them are predominantly African-American schools. We have a school district. Their task is to make sure all of our children are educated. I don't understand why it is that white children apparently are getting educated while black and brown children are not being educated. That's contaminated soil. That's the soil that needs to be cleansed so that all of the children receive the same quality education. It can't be based on economics. It can't be based on zip code. It must be based on the fact that we have a child that must be educated in order to grow up to be a productive member of society, away from incarceration, making a decent wage, and moving forward. So right now with the school system, that contaminated soil is inside of 75 Calhoun Street with the school board. Yes, I said it. It's all right.
And you talk about cleansing. How should education be cleansed in Charleston County and beyond?
I think that we need to wholesale go back to the practice of making sure that we are presenting a quality public education to all of our children. Making sure that our teachers, our educators are supported, not overruled. Okay, our teachers are the ones who are tasked with the job of educating our children. They have that gift, they have that knack in their hearts to educate, but because of the way the system is set up, they really don't have the leeway to do what their understanding of education is. They don't get paid well enough. We need to turn those things around and make sure that quality education is the primary focus. Quality public education is the primary focus, not all of these other privates and charters and all of these other, just quality public education. There's no reason why a kid can't get up in his neighborhood, go to his neighborhood school, and expect the quality education out of that school.
I've been looking at some, Instagram posters over the past couple of days, and people mention new racism.
Yeah.
What does new racism look like in your mind?
New racism. I haven't seen those, and I'm not on Instagram much. But new racism, I can't define new racism because the old definition is good enough. It's the disparate treatment or the discriminatory treatment of one ethnicity over another one. And that's an age-old definition. Maybe there are those who never realized or took into consideration the real aspects of racism. Maybe it might be new to them, but especially for black and brown people, most of us know what racism is. We're raised in that type of system, even if we're not taught about it. We have the understanding that, in certain situations, going into a store that we will be watched while others won't. Driving down the street that we have a higher chance of getting pulled over just because we're black. Or we drive a nice car. We're well aware. But for me to talk about new racism, that must be coming from somebody who never realized that we're racist anyway. We're living in a racist nation anyway.
You talk about, obviously, the law enforcement of society. In 4 words, what should be used as far as law enforcement, as far as transforming that particular department?
4 words?
You can go with 6.
No, I'm gonna just go with 4. 5. The need for total transparency. Okay. Now 6 words, and accountability. And right now, the way our law enforcement agencies, many of them are set up, there's no transparency. They fought, such as in North Charleston, against Citizens Review Board. They fought against racial bias audits. And those are the transparent aspects of it. Once transparency is had, now comes accountability. We pointed out the issues. Here is what we see needs to be done in order to make things right. And we have enough empirical evidence to prove that these things work. Now that you have these things on the table, it's time for you to make them happen. Accountability for it. And in the aftermath, in the training, in the preparation, and in the application for those entities to make it happen. I believe that making sure that we have full transparency and accountability in our law enforcement agencies ultimately will change the entire outlook of the systemic racism, aspect of systemic racism within law enforcement. I looked, and just over the last few days, I've seen municipal law enforcement agencies putting laws in place that make those officers who turn their head to wrongdoing fully accountable, prosecutable, and so that's a good thing. For too long, that blue wall of silence has allowed officers who do wrong to escape because their brothers are not going to tell on them. That has got to change.
What else are the law enforcement officials silent about when it comes to racism and justice?
Many times, actually, just address it. And I think it might be a matter of possible pride or just fear of exposure. Just addressing it, calling racism what it is, calling patterns and practices what they are. We've had big conversations about pretext stops, racially profiling. We've had big conversations about Black Lives Matter,
right,
and the indiscriminate killing of African Americans. But those same departments that could have been proactive about dealing with them, instead they denied them. Now there's no problem. We're handling them ourselves, and we don't need your input because we got this. We're still in Arlo. We still see the same thing happening. So I think that if that pride and that arrogance was just set aside, if they would just humble themselves and drop the authoritarian nature of policing, then they could receive that education from non-law enforcement people. But right now they'll say, okay, well, what degree you have in law enforcement? What have you done? How do you know this? Well, my degree comes from the other side, being on the other end of the racism. That's how I learned about it. And that's how I learned about the systems that we can put in place in order to change it. Citizens Review Board.
Okay.
Real simple. It's just selected by the people. Not by a mayor, not by city council, or nothing like that. People in the community who the community trusts, selected by the people to represent them as the community. People who can't be bought out by the governing system. People who, when an accident or a situation happens, officer-involved shooting happens, or something else, that they can be called in immediately, review what the evidence is, okay, probably with an oath not to share the actual evidence, but to assess the situation. Was this a good shoot for the cop, if there's a such thing, call it, well, there is a such thing, a good shoot, or was it a bad shoot? Was it something that the officer should not have done? And then to go back to the community, that same Citizens Review Board, go back to the community and say, we've seen the evidence. The officer was justified in what he did. And the community will say, okay, because we selected you, we can de-stress. We can de-escalate our activity. Because you already looked, you're impartial, you represent us, and you've seen that the shooting was justifiable. But if the shooting wasn't justifiable, that same review board comes back to the community and says, nope, it was not a justifiable shoot, and we are moving forward in order to do everything that we can in order to make sure that this cop is taken into custody and terminated. Okay?
Pastor Thomas Dixon, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups. I don't want to make you wait that mask too long.
It's all right. It's all right. No, thank you. It's just hard talking.
Sure.
That's all. And then it's a small one, so it's like easing down.
Yikes.
For sure.
Yeah.
But no, thank you so much, Quintin, as always. You
Yes,
know,
sir.
it's
Yes,
always
sir.
a pleasure to come sit and chat with you. That's for sure.
Likewise.
And the work that you're doing is phenomenal. Keep it up.
Thank you.
I don't care what those folks say. Keep it up.
Hey, I work for God, not them.
I know that's right. I know that's right, my friend. Sure, you're right. Thank you.
You're welcome.